Hi everybody, and welcome to the third session of the Integrated Risk Forum by Turnkey. So today we're joined by an extra special guest. He's a long-time friend of the company and one of our great mates from when we were actually allowed to meet up across the different social distance groups and everything else. But I'm delighted to welcome Gabriele Fiata, or Gabs as we call him because we just do. So yeah, very welcome to you and welcome to everybody who's joining us on the live broadcast. Just before we kick on, a couple of admin points before we get into the details onto this particular session, but we should say that this session is being recorded. So for those of you that are particularly precious and don't want any kind of recorded presence of your digital being, then please feel free to leave, but there is no personal details shared. There's no personally identified information that's coming through from the recording. So from a data privacy point of view, you're all good. A couple of other admin points as well. The session will be made available on demand. So if you've missed any of the previous two with Mark Jackson walking us through the what we can look forward to with UK SOX coming down the line, then please feel free to check that one out. And also the exciting session from Siemens that's just finished and how they've gone into business integrity screening, looking at real detailed control automation across those different topics as well. So some really exciting stuff that's already happened today. Anyway, on to Gabs. So yeah, as I said, we've known Gabs for a very long time. He's had various different job roles within SAP and has now really found a home within the Centre of Excellence supporting the GRC portfolio, so integrated risk, and has developed a passion for cybersecurity over his many years in the industry. So Gabs, would you like to expand any further onto your nefarious past or anything else, or do you want to just get straight onto the topic of what we're talking about today?
Thanks, Simon, for the introduction. And yes, I will actually expand a bit on my background and my history, even because I think it helps to kind of frame the session of today. Before I do that, perhaps a quick look at the agenda. Like Simon said, I've been working with Turnkey, since a long time. We always did what now is called the cybersecurity, and in the past I think was called security, for a number of years. And this is actually one of the reasons why I think we agreed on presenting to you a very interesting topic, I would say, which is the integration of security, what's now called cybersecurity, into the overall enterprise risk management framework. So today the agenda is going to start into looking at how critical that cyber risk has become, and then what are the common mistakes that we have seen companies making when managing cybersecurity, and then most importantly, how cybersecurity should be integrated into the overall enterprise risk management framework and processes, which is something that more and more companies are seeing as a must to succeed with their businesses. And then we're going to have a look at a demonstration of a dashboard that we created to actually integrate cybersecurity into the enterprise risk management world. And then, of course, we will open to Q&A.
I should just say at this point, we have got the Q&A boxes on the live chats as well. So when you are typing a question in, make sure you're on the stage tab, not the event. Otherwise, all of your questions will be going across the whole of the event. So please do bear that in mind. And feel free to use the Q&A box throughout the presentation. So whenever you get an idea that you want a question asked of, then please put it in there. We may well hold them back unless it looks like it's particularly relevant to the topic at hand. But otherwise, we'll keep an eye on those and try to make sure that we answer them either at the end of the session or follow up later on.
Perfect. All right. So, like I said, I will start with a quick introduction of myself and my experience. So I started back in 2004 working in the IT security space. At that stage, it wasn't really called cybersecurity; it was more IT security. But it's pretty much the same concepts of what now it's called cybersecurity. So I started as an administrator, but then I worked for a number of consulting firms where we were doing penetration testings. And for the ones of you that don't know what penetration testing is basically trying to get into the crown jewels of a company, which could be, for example, the data, for example, a data center, either through network or through physical access to the data center itself, to test whether the security measures of those companies were mature enough or not. So very similar to what now cybersecurity pen testing obviously do. And then in 2009, I actually took a little step back and I joined PepsiCo, where I was looking not only about cybersecurity, but looking into the IT risks and controls in general. Of course, cybersecurity or security being a big part of them, but it's not the only thing that you need to consider when looking at IT controls. 2014, I took even a bigger step back and I started to look at not just IT controls, but enterprise risk and audit in general. So how IT controls, of course, play a big part within the overall enterprise risk and management and audit, but it's not the only thing to consider. There are financial risks, there are supply chain risks, sales risks. All those actually form part of the enterprise risk management world that the company needs to care about. And finally, 2018, I got the opportunity to start on working for SAP, where looking always across risk, security, compliance, and audit, I had the opportunity to see and to experience how solutions and technologies can actually support companies through the process of enterprise risk management, integrated risk management, and of course, including cybersecurity, audit, and compliance. So today, what I would like to discuss with you is actually how the two words of cybersecurity and enterprise risk management can actually come together. And based on my experience, what I've seen companies failing with, and what I would personally suggest to the companies, and also what some standards framework suggest companies to do in order to ensure that we can mitigate this risk that seems to be one of the biggest risks that we're having in the last couple of years. So let's start with that. How is the cyber risk? How critical has the cyber risk become? So if I look at a number of stats that I took from the last couple of years. So in 2020, if we look at the World Economic Forum top 10 risks worldwide, cyber was actually the only area that showed up twice in that list. So together with other risks, of course, cyber shows up for the impacts of disruption of operations and theft of data or money, which are two main areas that companies suffered significantly since the last couple of years. And if I look at the 2021 kind of predictions, cybersecurity is actually number 4, just following some obvious risks like the infectious diseases, livelihood crisis, and extreme weather events. So it's becoming more and more one of the, for sure, top 10 risks for every organization, but for many organizations, it's actually, I would say, one of the top 3 risks to evaluate when planning their business objectives for the years ahead. So definitely something that needs to be watched out very carefully. And I then picked up this very interesting study from lots of studies that you probably find on the web. This is from the Cybersecurity Ventures. And it's interesting because they actually identified cybercrime as the 3rd biggest world economy by size, and actually to be more profitable than the global drug trade, and costing to the world more than all the natural disasters, which is as well, very worrying. And if you look at the prediction, by 2025, cybercrime will cost the world $10.5 trillion, which is scary. So this is why I think cybersecurity was taken as a subject for me to discuss today. And of course, also based on the passion I have for the topic of cybersecurity together with enterprise risk management, and give you, hopefully, some interesting information, and then you can take forward and hopefully, again, implement a cybersecurity framework as part of your overall integrated risk management framework. So even if cybersecurity is clearly one of the top risks for every organization, managing cybersecurity is not easy, and integrating cybersecurity with the overall enterprise risk management model, it's difficult. So we have seen companies failing with implementing such a process. And I was looking at a document from the NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which I will show you more in details in a minute. And they mention 4 main areas of challenges which are aligned or what we have seen at SAP as well. So the main failure or mistake is the overconfidence. So that's the problem that the board usually, or the companies, have, to be overly optimistic about a cyber risk. And that's primarily for, I would say, 3 main reasons. The first one is the lack of knowledge. So I think there is a bit of echo. I don't know if somebody maybe yeah, I can actually hear myself talking on the background. Okay, I think it's gone now. Thank you. And so basically, the overconfidence is about, first of all, the lack of knowledge that the company has on understanding cyber risk. They just don't understand it. And naturally, if you don't understand something, you kind of push it away. And this is why companies are starting to mitigate their risk by introducing chief information security officers as part of their board. So the chief information security officer can actually explain what a cyber risk is. But problem number 2 with that is that even the chief information security officer find challenging to communicate to the board in a language that they understand what is the impact that a cyber risk could have into the organization. And usually it's because they don't have that visibility that they will usually get when they have an end-to-end data that can actually show the risk of cyber risk, just because they don't have full visibility of what an impact could mean to the business objectives of a company. And this is what CISOs are trying to meet by leveraging technology to help them realizing what an impact of a cyber risk could be on the organization, which is something that I will show you later on with the dashboard in a nutshell. And the third point, which is an important challenge as well, is that the board usually sits in the middle between profit centers, for example, the sales organization that it's asking for budget and resources in order to start initiatives that will then help them to increase revenue and increase profit for the organization from one side of the table. And then on the other side, they have cost centers like security, which are usually the one being, let's say, difficult about things because they see the risk of, behind the project or behind an initiative, and their responsibility is to ensure that there is enough security to avoid any risks to put the company in danger. And without data, usually, or without some facts, the board tends naturally to listen more to the profit centers, which are the ones bringing money to the organizations, instead of paying maybe the attention that a CISO will deserve in such a situation. And primarily, again, this is because they don't have data that they can look at, or the CISO doesn't have data to provide to them that shows what the risk is. There is a great quote from one of the first data scientists that we had in the world, that was called Edwards Deming, that said, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And this is how a CISO feels during those meetings. He feels that he only has an opinion about something, but usually the board tends to listen more to the profit centers, which are the ones bringing money to the organizations. Those are the ones that usually receive most of the budget. The second area of mistakes is the group think. So this is a problem that it's very serious, because usually we see companies not mapping risks to owners. So they know there is a risk. And again, because they don't fully understand the risk, it's very difficult for somebody to own it, to be accountable for it. And that is a problem, because if you don't have somebody accountable for a risk, then it's very difficult for an organization to ensure that there are mitigation plans and projects to ensure that that risk gets mitigated to a level that the company can then accept. The third area is the one where there is a tendency, especially from board members, to focus on cyber risks once they heard it, maybe on the news. They hear it, a company that has been attacked, and it's everywhere in the news. Of course, they don't want to be the company, so they go to the CISO and they say, hey, can you ensure that we're not going to be this company that was in the news today? And of course, that puts the CISO in a very difficult situation, because he knows that there is not really a yes or no answer on whether are we going to get attacked or not. Nowadays, you can't be 100% sure that you will not get attacked, that you don't have a risk. You can, of course, mitigate that risk until it reaches a residual impact which can be accepted by the company. But usually it's very difficult when the board has a very strong opinion on something that they've seen in the news, and of course they understand because it's in the news and is made to be understood by people that are not experts in the cybersecurity space. And then the board goes with that idea that we need to solve this as priority one because I've seen the company being attacked on TV and I don't want to be that company. So usually that's a big problem, because then puts the CISO under lots of pressure, and maybe it doesn't let the CISO concentrating and focus on what really could be a risk for the company, which could be completely different from the one that was on TV, on the news. And finally, following trends. So asking security teams to fix things that are very obvious, that maybe happen to another company, but maybe nothing to do with your business. And risk can be very different, even from a cyber perspective. For a retailer, a big risk could be customer data, loss of customer data. For a hospital, it could be patient data. For a manufacturer, it could be intellectual property and stop of the business process, or maybe the stoppage of the warehouse, of the machineries. So each different business, of course, has got different risk, and an integrated risk management model that includes cybersecurity needs to ensure that cybersecurity controls are done tailored to the specific business process and tailored to defend and protect the data which is most important for your specific business. So we'll see later on now, I will show you how you can actually try to mitigate those mistakes or fix those mistakes and mitigate those risks through a framework, and I will show you one example, and also supported by technology, which is what I will show you with the dashboard. Let's have a look first at an example of how you should integrate cybersecurity into your enterprise risk management. And as I said before, I will take as an example the NIST model, because it's a very interesting framework, and also provides a lot of information that are public and available to all of you. So I will actually show you very quickly one document that then you can, of course, go and access, and will provide you lots of information to get started if you need to get started with this, or to validate that what you're doing, it's going towards the right direction. So this is actually a picture that I took from the document, which I will show you in a minute. The main objective, as you can see from the chart on the right, is to ensure that you build up a cybersecurity enterprise risk register, but then at the end, you actually integrate that with a broader enterprise risk register. Starting from the lower level, which is actually the system level cybersecurity risk register, which is usually the most technical part, where you collect all your logs, all your events that happen in your systems, and where you make your analysis to ensure if there is something suspicious going on. And then you use that information, you normalize it, and you aggregate it in a way that can actually be combined with other enterprise registers. Like here I have a couple of examples for finance and for regulatory requirements. So at that stage, you then integrate the cybersecurity risk with the broader risks that the organization has, and then you translate those informations into language that the business understands. So you suddenly are able to quantify, or better estimate, because quantify is a big word. I mean, we would love to be able to quantify the impact of a cyber risk in monetary value. I think we can get closer to that. We can estimate how much it could be. It will never be 100%, but an estimation is already a good starting point to start a conversation with the board, which will happen at this stage when you're actually able to provide to them information that they understand in monetary value, which will then help the chief information security officer or the chief risk officer to make their case for investments. They can then suddenly be in a position where they can tell the board, this is how much we are losing if we don't mitigate this risk, and this is how much it will cost us to mitigate the risk. And with those two information, then have an interesting conversation with the board to understand whether it makes sense to mitigate a risk or not. That could be cyber risk today that takes the priority one. Tomorrow it could be a finance risk that takes priority one. But when you have all the data together, and when you put risks on the same level and you aggregate data together, you're actually able to then prioritize better which are the areas of investments. Now, I don't want to show you the full document, of course, but I will quickly jump into it before we move on with the next topics, because it's a document that I found very interesting, because first of all, has a lots of assets embedded that also include Excel sheets with template frameworks that you can use as a starting point. It's quite recent, so it's October 2020. And the document itself, and I will only show you for now the table of contents, where you will see that it goes in a number of details, which are definitely broader than what we discussed today, to explaining what are the gaps with managing cybersecurity and risk, but also giving you indications on how you could implement a process from a theory perspective, but also, as you will see, it's got some very nice representations on how you could structure your organization around it, and also how you could structure your framework and your risk and control matrix, until how you could actually structure the risk assessments cycle. And of course, those are only suggestions, but the NIST framework is actually pretty accurate, and I'm pretty sure you will find all those informations interesting, and you will see how detailed the document is. So I really invite you to have a look at it, once you have access to this presentation, and I'm sure it will help you with this mission. Now, once you get familiar with the NIST framework, you will also see that the NIST framework is based on 5 main pillars, which are required to support companies reaching a desired level of cybersecurity. Of course, I will have to show you what SAP can provide in that space too. Now that we are getting closer to looking at a quick demonstration of a dashboard, you will see that we have solutions that are standard, SAP, cybersecurity solutions, access management, as well as risk and compliance, which kind of cover pretty much all the 5 pillars. Of course, those needs to be then supplied by processes, by services that you get from companies like Turnkey, for example, which are very familiar and have used the NIST framework since a number of years. And what we'd like to show you now is actually how you can get, or basically how SAP visions a dashboard that actually unifies the solutions together and the processes together to ensure that you can not only detect cyber attacks to your organization, but you can actually integrate those with your enterprise risk management model, which is what I will show you with a dashboard. Okay, so it's going to be a very quick demo because I don't want to overload you with informations, but I think I'm going to show you maybe a couple of screens that you will find interesting, especially based on what we just discussed. So I'm going to switch now and share my dashboard that you should be able to see now. And I'm going to make this full screen. So as you can see, what we first see here is a timeline of alerts. So here we are really looking at cybersecurity alerts telling us whether there is something suspicious happening in our landscape. There is 2 things we can do here. There is one thing is that going closer to understand what this means from a cybersecurity perspective, which is not the objective of today, but just to show you that you can deep dive into details and look at what are the security operations doing when it comes to managing a cyber risk. This is usually what I will show to cybersecurity people. So people that really want to understand, okay, how was the solution able to identify such threats? And of course, I will then drill down into all the graphs that you see to show where the data is coming from. But the objective for today is different. So if I go back to the main page, what I want to show you is not really how the solution is able to identify those threats, but it's actually how we are able to integrate it with the overall enterprise risk management model and actually assess what the overall residual risk could be in terms of monetary value. Of course, it's just an estimation, but back to the earlier discussion with the board, if you don't present anything to the board, they are less likely to listen to you. If you come with a number and say, hey, this is what we estimate being a problem, then you suddenly have their attention and they can make better decisions on where to invest for risk mitigation. Then what you can do leveraging data is actually adding more information. For example, the board wants to know what type of risk. So what risk are we talking about? So here I see that the biggest risk is for Spain for the risk failure to meet data privacy regulation. And if I want to look at these 2 dimensions in a different way, I can actually use a heat map, which is something that usually the board really likes. They like to look at things easy. So here I can see directly the country with the biggest risk and what is the biggest risk, which is failure to meet data privacy regulation for Spain, and actually look at the risks in the other countries too. I definitely know that this is my top one risk at the moment. And this is not based on trends. It's not based on what I read on the newspaper or what I see on the news this morning. It's data telling me that, which is a very strong indication, of course. And of course, the risks are then the risks that I defined being part of my business risk. And then we were talking about accountability before and group thinking, which was a big mistake. So having a way to actually, maybe I should say Mary McCoy. So having a way to actually assign risk owners to a risk and show them how much the residual risk for that specific risk owner is actually something that will ensure that there is a follow-up done with that specific person to show then there is a mitigation plan in place to reduce perhaps the residual risk of that specific item. And again, if I want to then sort by Spain, I just want to see what are the top risks for Spain and what are my risk owners. I can see here Jose Vega. I can see Giovanni Ricci is owning a business disruption downtime. And I can see the other risk owners owning the other risks. Now, here we are still in the cybersecurity. All the risks that you see are actually, as you can see, cybersecurity risks. So risks which are related to a cybersecurity failure or a potential cybersecurity failure. Now, at this stage, what's important is for the board to understand the bigger picture, to see, okay, how does this risk of cyber that you show me now compare to the other risks that I have in my business? And here, what we can do is actually drill down into the risk details when we take a step back from the cybersecurity world and we actually look broader at what are all the risks which are impacting that country in this specific moment of time. Here we see our risk owners, but we also see that they're not only responsible for cybersecurity, which is of course the biggest risk, as we can see from the dashboard, but they are also looking after risks which are nothing to do with cybersecurity, but they have to do with, for example, error in revenue recognition, which could be a massive risk. Not really cybersecurity related, maybe, because revenue recognition problems can come from a number of sources, but it's still a risk that needs to be evaluated together with cybersecurity to then understand where you mitigate and how you mitigate, also taking in consideration what is the cost of your mitigation versus what is the overall residual loss. If the cost of a mitigation is bigger than the loss, you probably think about whether you really want to mitigate that. In the opposite way, if a mitigation is much bigger, if a mitigation cost is lower than a residual, not residual, but if your mitigation cost is smaller than your overall risk, that means that you need to mitigate more because it makes sense, of course. So basically, that's what I wanted to show you, giving you a bit of in a nutshell, a view on why it's important to include cybersecurity into your overall enterprise risk management process and how leveraging the right processes and the right technologies, you're actually able, or you could be able to estimate cost of mitigations versus cost of risk and impacts, and then instruct your board or convince your board about the best decisions to make to safeguard your business. So with that, I think I'll probably pause. And Sam, I don't know if you have anything to add or any questions at this stage.
Well, there are a few questions that have come through. Just checking that you can hear me and we're not getting any sort of feedback loops now.
No, I'm just gonna. Yeah, I think I can hear you now. Yes, go ahead.
Super. Yeah, so we have had a couple of questions, and I think they range between the sort of generic overall in terms of how do we get introduced to this? How do we start it, and how do we scope it? So we've had a couple here from a Mr. Dave Lamb saying we operate a load of cyber controls and tooling, but how do we evaluate which ones are important and they're covering up the right things or identifying gaps? And I think you alluded to that earlier, where you were talking about actually focusing on the risk and understanding what's that threat perspective, what's that importance and criticality, and almost working it out by a mitigating strategy based upon the residual risk score that you're looking at, or the cost to implement. I wonder whether you think about how can you get some sort of real-time information or get some insight into quantifying those risks. I know you said it's really difficult to do, but can you give us some strategies as to how you might go about trying to move that towards a more accurate figure?
Yeah, no, thanks, Simon. So great question, first of all, and then I agree with everything you said, Simon. It's and yes, it is difficult, and it's never going to be a 100% quantification of what a risk could mean to the organization, but there are methods and tools that can help us to estimate what that risk could be, and therefore ensure that you are putting controls in the right places. As you probably know, Simon, we've been working in with Turnkey in the past to trying and integrate the information that we get from cybersecurity solutions, which could be CM solutions, so security and incident solutions, or from solutions like enterprise threat detections. We can get some alerts of suspicious activities, and those alerts and this data can actually be integrated with solutions like risk management. That can be SAP risk management, or could be any other risk management solution that the customer has. Of course, you need to kind of build the logic between the data that is going into the enterprise risk management solution, getting that data aggregated also with data coming from your ECC, S4HANA, or any other ERP environments, to then identify and estimate what the impact of a specific suspicious activities or problem could be in the organization. I will just going to give you one example. If you create what in SAP risk management we call key risk indicator, so an automated key risk indicator that looks into your data in the systems and understands how much sensitive customers' information you store in a specific process. And if that shows up that you have a lot of information that was lately added into your system, and at the same time from your security solution you see that there was an unusual access to those informations that are very critical, that suddenly you can estimate what will be the risk. And you can estimate that based on the number of customers, how big those customers are, how important those customers are, and how big the risk, for example, could be from a reputation perspective, that eventually can translate of how much a reputation problem will cost to my business going forward. And there are lots of techniques, and Simon, you know this better than me, to quantify and qualify how big that risk could be. But of course, technology can be used to give a very good estimation if processes are in place.
Yeah, great. I completely agree with a lot of that. So, moving on to some of the other questions, we've had one on NIST, and I think that's probably a good opportunity to pick up some of the poll information as well. So the quick poll that went out as part of this session was just to try and find out where people spend their time across the different security domains, whether that's identify, detect, protect, respond, or recover. I think I've got those right. I'm sure Tom Venables will correct me if I didn't. But yeah, so a lot of people have come back saying they spend a lot more of their time or focus on identify. And that's quite interesting, really, because that shows that there's a lot of people, from our point of view, looking at the identification of risk and trying to understand where that comes from. So again, interested in your perspective, Gabs, about where you think the concentration of effort ought to be And from which main people in the business do you think that might change?
Yeah, well, so that's another great question. Now I need to think about an answer. Yes. So identify, it is definitely the most obvious one, because lots of companies actually failed lately to identify an attack, to identify not just an attack, but to identify what the impact of the attack could be in the business. Because at SAP, we get attacked every single day, and some of those attacks, they do bypass our network, but we try and we make our best to identify which of those could actually create harm to our company, and we stop those attacks, versus the ones that perhaps, and there are many of those, that they could not create any harm, or it looks like they will not be creating any harm, and we will have to deprioritize those. So we need to ensure that we're always focusing on the top risks in order to safeguard our company, because there could be one attack that becomes then catastrophic. And you need to ensure that you identify that attack and you stop it. So identify definitely where the focus is, especially at the beginning, and who is responsible for that. And the obvious answer is the CISO, because the CISO, it is the one responsible to the overall security of an organization. But if we think about it, the executives like a CEO, a CFO, or a CIO, they're equally accountable for it. I mean, those are the people running the company. So they are accountable, and they should be the ones ensuring that the CISO it's in a position, or is made in a position, to actually being able to identify all the risks. And of course, after that, ensure that you can protect your company so that those risks do not become incidents, and then you can detect on time, you can respond real time, and recover in case that you have a breach. I know that maybe doesn't answer the question 100%, but let's say it's my best answer. I'm not hearing anything. I don't know if you guys can still.
There we go. I think, yeah, it does answer the question in part, at least. And I think my synopsis of that would be, depends where you fit in the organization. So if you're in the risk domain, of course, you'll be looking at trying to understand those persistent threats, those threat actors that might be spinning up opportunities to disrupt you. And that would definitely be in the CTI area, those sorts of nefarious actors that you're trying to identify and see whether they're relevant to you, and that classification of how strong that threat is. But if you're in more of the operational area, then I think I agree that you'll be focusing far more on the protect, definition of the right controls, and detecting those incidents as they come through. Exactly as you said, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of attempts every day, and identifying through the detect processes which ones are important to focus on, and then responding to them in an appropriate manner, using the right tools and processes that you put in place to actually be able to do that. So I think, yeah, you have to pay at least some attention to all of these domains, and it will be really dependent upon whose responsibility is it to actually make sure that that's working correctly. I would disagree that you say it's the responsibility of the CISO and the executives, because I don't think it is. They may be accountable if it goes wrong, but it's the responsibility of every single person in the organization to actually help to make this work. And we've seen it so often that the easiest defense to breach is just trying to pretend to be somebody, or get somebody's password, or just get somebody to do something through a simple social engineering attack or a phishing scam. So yeah, everybody's at a potential vulnerability in the organization as soon as we give them a user ID or access to key systems of record. Just to close and move on, I think there's been a few technical questions about the qualities of ETD. Unfortunately, we don't have a huge amount of time to go into those, but we will definitely respond. But the questions were, how do they ETD stack up against SIEM tools? Very well, generally. It's not necessarily trying to compete with Splunk and the same kind of pain, but it's absolutely pivotal in able to surface the SAP data with the right context, because we're talking about ERPs here, integrated solutions, and a simple 1 or 0 in has it been compromised or not is not sufficient to be able to manage those risks. And yeah, of course, ETD does connect with non-SAP systems as well, either to do the alerting, the aggregation, or it can provide that through to a different SIEM tool. So it's not a question of a discretionary choice as to which one. It's a question of what's the right solution overall to meet your needs.
Yep, I agree.
Gabs, that's been fantastic as ever. We could talk all day. We have done many times about exactly what these sorts of topics are, but I did just want to leave with some trails for the future sessions today and just highlight a couple of others that are potentially of interest. So we've got another customer case study with UPM looking at business partner screening later on. That's a slightly different risk area, looking at third-party risk management and how to manage sort of contingent workers and different business partners that may well be coming and interacting with your systems. We've got a good opportunity to talk about SAP in the wider context, so talking about the power of multiple solutions with ServiceNow and why they're not competitive, why they're absolutely complementary. Again, picking up on some of the themes that Gabs mentioned. And my particular favorite, we've got the Turnkey Turkey Den, where we're pitting our practice directors against each other. So if you want to see who wins out of IRM, IAM, or cybersecurity, then tune into that one at 3 p.m. UK time, because I'm sure that will be an excellent fight. And I'm not going to tell you who I'm backing in that one, but that will be very, very exciting. And then to close us off, we've got the bookend. We started off with UK stocks first thing this morning with Mark Jackson, and we're closing with some lessons to be learned from the US side of things. So Turnkey, having entered the US market with gusto, we're now going to rely on some of our US-based clients with Grant Small and Megan Boyd, who are talking to us about some of their experiences of the US side of SOX and what we've got to look forward to in the UK in particular. Anyway, that's probably it for timings, but you've got the contact details for both Gabs and myself there. If there are any further questions that you have on this topic, you know we're all ears and we'll absolutely be love to respond to those. And Gabs, I look forward to the next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Simon. Thanks, everybody.